everyone, it's me, Manvik from the Robotics Academy, and today I'm going to be going over how you can get started with Python. So first off, what is Python? So Python is a programming language, and a programming language is basically how computers can understand what tasks to do, right? So you can kind of control computers with Python. Now, why should you start off with Python as your first programming language? The thing is, Python is one of the easiest programming languages to learn and is also one of the most versatile and heavily used. So even if you just learn Python, you're fine. But if you want to go beyond that, then learning Python is a great first step because it's easy to get into and sets you up for tons and tons of other languages. So before we get into how you can set up Python, I wanted to go over the two main options that there are for coding in Python. So the first one is on your own device. This is when you download Python and have some environment to code in. And then the second one is online. So what are the benefits of each approach? So online means that there's much less setup because the website already does the setup for you, right? Whereas on your computer, you have to set it up yourself. However, on your computer, there'd be zero usage limits, right? The only thing that's limiting you is your own hardware. So if you have really good hardware and you want to run some heavy or complicated code, then maybe setting it up on your computer is the best approach. Also, setting it up on your computer might give you much more flexibility than online. Now, that being said, I'm going to be going over both approaches in this video, but I heavily recommend going with the online version if this is your first time getting into programming or Python in general, just because it's much easier to use as a learning basis. So let's get into first installing Python on your own device. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is head over to python.org/downloads. You can also just find this by searching up Python and it will guide you to the download page. So this is if you're going to be doing it locally, you'd want to have Python installed. Python doesn't really come natively with a lot of computers, and so you have to download it yourself. And the process for that is really simple. You just hit download Python. I'd recommend just hitting whatever latest version it tells you to, especially if you're new to Python, and then continuing with that process, right? And then it will give you all the setup instructions to get started. Another thing you might consider is getting an IDE. So Python does give you like notepads and stuff to code with, like almost like a text file, but those might not be the best experience, and you might want to switch to an IDE. So what is an IDE? An IDE, or an integrated development environment, is a place that gives you much more features and much more functionality while coding. So here are some examples of really common ones, and one of the most common ones is Visual Studio, and I'll show you a photo of that in a sec. But here's some other ones, right? PyCharm is one by JetBrains, and that offers some expansion if you want to use it for like enterprise solutions. And Xcode is actually native on Mac. So there's always a bunch of options for IDEs, and the main benefit for using an IDE is you can download extensions, you can have like little features that make coding easier, or you could have like an AI sidekick to help you as you code. But really, if you're learning, you don't really need an IDE. So this is VS Code. Like I mentioned before, VS Code is an example of an IDE, or an integrated development environment, and it offers you some pretty cool features that will help you with your coding. So right now I have a script of some Python tic-tac-toe game I made, and VS Code did kind of help in the process. So I'm going to quickly show you some of the cool features you might get from an IDE, but in no way is any of this required when you're just learning Python. So you can see how you can quickly and easily see your files. So if you're managing a bunch of scripts or files, it helps with that. If you're using GitHub, then you can connect to a repository easily. This might be if you're like working on a big project. And also if you're coding, then you can ask Copilot questions about your code. So now that we've seen what an IDE looks like and how you can install Python locally, let's go over what the process for Python is going to be if we're just going to be doing it online. So there's tons and tons of websites you can use for that, but the one I recommend the most is Google Colab. And there's a few reasons for that. One of them is that it's made by Google. So all you really need is a Google Gmail address, and then all your code gets saved to a Google Drive. And so you can save stuff really easily and it doesn't get deleted when you close the tab. Also, it has a lot of ways to expand. So Google Colab is actually designed mostly for machine learning applications. And so if you do want to get into that future, I highly recommend Google Colab because it sets you up with GPUs that you can train models on and even more. And it's just a really great experience. Also, Google Colab sets you up with Jupyter Notebooks, which is the format that it uses and which is pretty common with machine learning applications. So let's navigate over to Colab in Google and then hit this first link, Welcome to Colab. It might ask you to sign on, but after that, you're going to be greeted with this screen that's asking you to open a new notebook. So let's make a new notebook, and it's going to load for a little bit, and boom. So we have the Google Colab notebook. So I'm just going to close that update right there. But the way you connect to Python is by hitting connect in the top right, and then we're ready to start coding. So there's two things I want to talk to you about these Google Colab notebooks or Jupyter notebooks before you guys get started. So there's these two things called code blocks and text blocks. And in code blocks you code, and in text blocks you write text. So currently it has a code block open by default, and you can code in that. So if I wanted to do print hello world, I could do that in the code block. And you can see I didn't actually have to hit connect. I could just run code and it would automatically connect. But in that case, if I run or write something in a code block, then it's going to create code and I can run it by hitting that play button. Now, say I just want to write some notes or some text, then I could use a text block and I can write hello world. But you can see that this isn't actually code that's running and I can't run it. But that being said, that's all you really need for an online setup, and Google Colab is probably your best option. So I hope that taught you how you can learn to install Python and get started with it. And now, once you've installed Python, you want to learn how to use it and learn how to code in it, right? And that's where I recommend the Robotics Academy's Python 101 course, where we go over all the key concepts you need to get started with making projects in Python and even give you some challenges so you can make some early projects in the beginning. So be sure to check that out, and thanks for coming.